I think we'll go ahead and get started. I've been so excited to have this conversation this morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Monica Smith. I'm one of the co-creators of Rebel 11 along with Joni Parsons. Joni and I started Rebel 11 5 years ago now to bring women together for conversations about topics that are meaningful to us. And this is certainly a meaningful conversation with Laila this morning. I met Laila just over a year ago now in the midst of total chaos. It was the middle of the pandemic. I was having a health crisis. It was just before the holidays. So it's just, there was Laila, so joyful, so calming, and yet so open and vulnerable. We were a quick study in friendship, and I just adore her, and I think that you will too. I don't know about you, but when I go home, or when I used to go home to my parents' house for the holidays, they've since passed, with my 3 siblings, we would quickly, all of us, regress into behaviors that were our lesser selves. Does that resonate? And it was such an easy time and place to, I don't know, start to see or identify some patterns or stories that had been created so many years ago. So that's what we're going to talk about with Laila. Welcome, Laila. So happy to share this morning with you. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here. And I love hearing that I'm not the only one that regresses into my, 15-year-old self when I go back home. And I even talk about it in my book. It's like, what is that? It's like your body, your mind, being just kind of knows like, oh, this is who I am here, right?
I didn't, just so you know, Laila, I did share your background with the registrants, but I did also, and so I'm not going to go into details, but Laila, I just finished reading this. Laila just recently came out with this book, Strong Like Water, and I highly recommend it. And congratulations, Laila.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a labor of love.
Yeah, I bet.
Well, why don't I take over the screen and jump in, if I can, share screen. Can you see my
Not yet.
Not yet.
But it looks like, yep, there we go.
And there we go. So
Laila,
today,
it looks like we have your notes as well.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
there we go.
right. Oops.
Oh,
Share. I'm not quite sure the order, so I'll try it again. So
yep,
here we go.
No worries.
Share. Now?
Yep, that's great. We can see the menu at the top, but that's perfectly okay.
No problem. Okay. So as Monica said, I'm Laila Tarraf, and it's really awesome to be with all of you today. And I'm really excited to talk a little bit about our stories. You may not know it, but we all have a story, right? In fact, we are living inside of our story of our own creation. And our story is constructed from our core beliefs that we've developed based on our experiences throughout our lives. And it forms a sense of who we are and what we value. And unless we examine and understand our stories, many of our automatic patterns, the ones that tend to come out of the holidays, these patterns of behavior and underlying beliefs oftentimes remain hidden to us. So the holidays especially can bring up a lot for many of us. I love this picture, right? Reconnecting with our families of origin, our in-laws, our old friends, can bring up who we were back when we lived around them, right? And no matter, for me at least, no matter how much I thought that I had grown, I had made insights, I had matured, moved on in my life, the holidays had a way of making me feel as if I'd gone right back into high school and just kind of stuck. So this could be, I think, a really great time for us to pay attention to the stories that we might be holding on to that may no longer serve us, or maybe they're not even true anymore. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of my story today. Professionally, as you see, I've been lucky to work at some great companies, both in operating roles as well as an advisor within a couple of private equity firms. And today, I'd like to share a little of my story with you to illustrate how stories can help us navigate and be successful in the world, but then at some point, they prevent us from growing as people and as leaders in our lives. So my first indication that the story I had been living in was problematic came a couple of years after I graduated from business school. I was lucky enough to graduate in the middle of the first internet bubble in the late 90s, so there were a lot of options at the time. And I was hired to be employee number 7 at the internet division of Walmart. So after a year running recruiting, I was given the opportunity to step into the broader HR role. And I reported into Jean Jackson. She was this no-nonsense CEO, female CEO, who I was sort of equal parts inspired and terrified by. You know the ones? So one day, very early in my time at Walmart.com, as I was sitting in yet another long and I thought boring meeting, I couldn't help but fidget. And I thought, come on, people, I don't have all day. And as the meeting drew to a close, Jean gave me the finger, not the one you're thinking of, the one that said, come into my office right now. And so, I kind of hustled over, kind of half thinking she was going to praise me. Such was my delusion. And instead, she looked me straight in the eye and she said, never do that again. And, I was still pretty early in my career. And at first I was at a loss. I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. But then she started to describe to me my body language and my behavior in that meeting. And I realized I wasn't doing a very good job hiding my impatience and my irritation. So, okay, maybe I was a teeny weensy bit impatient, but I thought the whole point of it was to get things done. But as Jean sort of wagged her finger at me, and she said that if she ever saw me eye rolling again, there'd be hell to pay. All I could do was stand there sort of speechless, because, and it must have shown, because she looked at me and she said, the importance of those meetings is not getting things done, but bringing people along. Okay, I'd never heard this. This sounded like heresy to me. I thought the whole point was getting things done. I left her office sort of feeling disoriented. I mean, what did that even mean? Because at this point in my career, I was still holding on to the fact and the worldview that being smart and capable and moving fast was how I added value. That was my story. But Jean's reprimand shook me, and I started to reflect more deeply on why it was so important for me to be seen as strong and competent. And then conversely, why it was so hard for me to show any sort of vulnerability, especially at work. It would take a series of life tragedies for me to become aware of the story that had been driving my actions my whole life. So I'm the eldest of 3, the daughter of Lebanese immigrants who moved from Beirut when it was in its heyday, to a dusty little town called Las Vegas in the early 70s, which at the time only had about 200,000 residents, which is really a tenth of its size today. And it was this weird mix of cowboys and transplanted casino types, from mobsters to dealers, cards, not drugs, I think. And my parents had a very traditional marriage. Dad landed a job as a croupier, a craps dealer at the Sands Hotel, and mom stayed home, took care of the house and the kids. And, moving to a foreign country with 3 young kids added stress on their young marriage. And frankly, they fought a lot. And as the eldest, I took on this role of the mediator, not only with my parents, but with my siblings too. And I learned important skills as a mediator, right? Like how to ingratiate myself to both sides of the argument. I learned how to be in both camps at once to get the love and attention I needed as a child. But while I empathized with my mother, I wanted to be powerful like my father. I wanted to be strong and capable, hoping he would see something in me that was more like him. And at a certain point, while I love them both, subconsciously, I made the decision to be more like my dad. I mean, I saw two people, one that looked like he was powerful and strong, and the other vulnerable and exposed. And given these two choices, I chose to be powerful. And as I grew, I honed my ability to find the middle ground, which allowed me to fit in and be accepted at home and at school. At night at home, I was Lebanese. During the day, I was American. Kibbeh and hummus for dinner, burgers for lunch. Not too much one or the other, a blend able to fit into both places. So I really learned to be a chameleon. And what I didn't realize was that I was losing touch with what I wanted and what I felt deep inside. And from this sort of out of touch place, I constructed a story about who I thought I was. And it went something like this. I'm strong and capable, and I'm good at figuring out who I have to be to fit into any situation. I'm a doer. I'm not afraid to dive right in and solve problems, mine and everyone else's, whether they want it or not. This is how I add value and consequently get the love and attention I need. And I don't whine because that doesn't get me anything. Besides, only victims complain, and I'm certainly not a victim. I am the hero. So this became the manifesto for what I call my hero persona. I joined the ranks of the overachievers. And when I got to business school, I looked around and I thought, yes, these are my people. It is no wonder I didn't understand Jean's comment she made to me 20 years ago, because being in control and getting things done was the only things on my radar. Bringing people along just didn't even register. But at that time, I didn't see it. I was completely blind to my story and how I was showing up early in my career. There were likely indicators along the way I may have noticed if I'd been paying closer attention, like the fact that I was obsessively and quite often and irrationally reframing everything to fit into my narrative. So I made no space for any type of negativity. And when you're the hero, you don't complain because there's no room for hopelessness or vulnerability in your world. And I was the queen of at least, right? Insisting you're just not looking at things the right way. And if I might have just taken a moment to stop and allow myself to feel any hint of stress or anxiety inside of myself, instead of distracting myself, I may have started to sort of get on to myself about the story that I was carrying. But I just didn't, right? It was locked and loaded that this is how the world was and this is who I was. And yet this narrative served me well for a long, long time, right? It allowed me to stay above a lot of really messy feelings. It allowed me to integrate into a new life in a new country, surviving a difficult childhood. And I kind of became the stereotypical first generation overachiever. I'm sure you've all heard about the idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy. I wanted to go through this with you because it really helped me to start unpacking my story and raise my awareness to it. It starts with what we believe. And so for me, this was this idea that I developed pretty early on that no one was going to do anything for me and that I could only rely on myself, which influences my actions. Well, if I can't rely on anyone, I just better jump on in and take care of things myself, which impacts other people's beliefs. Wow, she's so capable. I don't need to help her. She totally has it handled, which then causes them to stay out of my way, which reinforces my core belief that I can't rely on others. So I continue to jump in and try to fix things myself. And on it goes. And I had no awareness that I was influencing what was showing up for me. This became my self-fulfilling prophecy. And the problem with this narrative is that it doesn't leave any space to focus on anything less than being positive and moving into action. No room for feeling tired or sad or overwhelmed. And because I had constructed a world where I wasn't allowed to show any weakness, I couldn't tolerate it when I saw it in others. So if I felt that someone was struggling with something, instead of really empathizing and asking them what might be wrong, I just jump right in and try to solve the problem for them, right? And this did two things, neither good, by the way. First, it robbed them of the opportunity to learn. And second, it allowed me to avoid having to connect on a more personal level, to show more empathy and compassion, to better understand their struggle. Because it was so much easier for me to fix something than to have to sit with all these uncomfortable, sort of less than positive feelings. And if I'm really honest, it's still hard for me to tell this story today, but I was stuck in this closed loop system. And the only way to break out of it is by having an intervention of some sort. Most times it takes a major life event to have you look at your story. For me, it took 3. As I'm sure many of you know, and as we've seen over the last couple of years, tragedy has a way of bringing what's important in life in clear focus. And so when I had to sit down with my 3-year-old daughter to tell her that her father had died 2 years earlier, it was clear that the normal coping mechanisms I'd always used to stay above the messiness of life just weren't going to work anymore. I mean, this wasn't something I could tough out or gloss over or power through, which were sort of my normal coping mechanisms to intellectualize things. I had to emotionally show up for her, and I had to do it every day. And so hiding from my feelings was no longer an option, which just blew up my story. There was no way I could stay above it all and continue to play the hero at that point. I don't know if you guys know David White. He's this amazing English-Irish poet, and he wrote a poem called Start Close. It's about the journey all of us take in life as we grow. And in it, he says, take the first step, not the second or the third. Take the one you don't want to take. And that just really resonated with me. And I had to ask myself, what's the step I don't want to take? What is the shift in perspective that threatens to unseat how I've always seen things, and the one that interrupts that closed loop? And honestly, the one that makes me feel exposed and vulnerable. You know that movie that came out probably 5-6 years ago now, Inside Out, the Pixar movie, where all the characters play the different emotions. When I saw that, when I saw Joy draw a circle around sadness, and she told her that her job was to make sure that all the sadness stays inside of the circle, it's touched something deep inside of me, because that was me. I really saw that while I had developed the ability to move fast and solve problems, I'd really done it by cutting myself off from my feelings and losing so many opportunities to build emotional resilience. I was just all out of balance, right? I had this strong, overdeveloped intellect, but a really fragile and underdeveloped heart. And that's what happens in life, right? I mean, the qualities that serve us well and oftentimes even save us, at some point in our lives start to hold us back. There's this great business coach, his name is Marshall Goldsmith. He's an author, and he wrote this book maybe 12 years ago called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's a really great book about how the qualities that you build up and save you the first half of your life are exactly the ones you need to start letting go of in order to grow. So my lesson in this is that examining our story and discovering our blind spots is what will enable us to grow as people and as leaders. And developing the awareness and the ability to be flexible and adaptable in our minds and in our actions is what will help us evolve our story to one that continually serves us as we move throughout our lives. And the thing to note is that the reason we hold on so tightly to our original narrative is because we've over-identified with it. We think it's who we are. And I remember thinking, but who would I be if I weren't the hero? And we don't really realize that our stories are just a construct we made up. So it really feels like part of us is dying. And that's why it's so hard for us to let go of our stories. We think it's who we are, but it's not. It's a story we made up to help us out, and we can change it anytime we like. In fact, we must change it in order to grow. And, you don't have to be in a crisis to examine your story, though usually that's what ends up happening. You could actually get curious and start noticing where it serves you and where you might be getting stuck. Re-examining our story just requires a little bit of intellectual honesty and a healthy dose of courage. So I wanted to try to have a little fun with you guys and stop talking and have you think about what story you might be living in. Like, who are you in your story? What would the title be? What's your persona? I'll give you some examples. Like, are you the person who never gives up, right? The little engine that could, or are you a people pleaser? You're always prioritizing others' needs. Are you fearless? No challenge too big, no mountain too high. Or maybe are you more cautious, really never wanting to be exposed or caught unprepared? Because remember, our behaviors oftentimes belie what's unconscious. And what we're trying to do here is make more conscious what might be hidden down just a few layers. Okay, so take a minute and throw in the chat or shout out what you think the story is that you might be living in. I'd love to hear from you. Who are you? What's the title? What would your partner, your husband, your wife, your mother, your children? Let's see. As someone on the other end of the spectrum, I lead as a vulnerable person. Lovely. How do I work for someone who is the antithesis of that? Oh, that's a whole presentation in of itself, which I'm happy to address maybe when we get into the Q&A. I would say that very quickly, it's not being vulnerable, it's establishing boundaries, right? Because if you have boundaries, you don't have to worry about the merging and them really piercing that. Anybody else? Stories? What story do you think you're living in? Anybody else has this hero complex? In my story, I can do everything by myself. I do not need help. That is a very common story for women. That's a very common story. I grew up believing I was useless. Thank you for sharing, Helen. Thank you. Who else? What core beliefs are we holding on to? Who are we? I'm viewed as a problem. I grew up feeling a failure. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm sorry. I can actually do hard things. Lovely. I've changed my story recently. It would be called highly sensitive and strong. The story used to be oversensitive and different. I love that. That is a beautiful reframing. I love it. Thank you, Laura. I grew up believing I have to be cool with everything and just be happy and fun. Ooh, boy, can I relate with that. Yes. Yeah. Got to be smiley, got to be perfect. Everything's fine. Nothing bothers me. Yeah, I understand that one. Anyone else? Okay. So I want to be in love again with a spouse. Oh, I grew up the person my parents wanted me to be. Yes, 100%. Okay, so now let's think about what's one way your story has helped you, and then maybe how has it hindered you? Because it cuts both ways, right? Not sure how I get other people to see my story as it is now, though. Yeah, okay. The epicenter of complete non-control as to what happens to me. No choice but the way I face it. You mean your story is that you don't control what happens to you?
Yes. And it's true. I have a terminal illness, so I can't control it.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah, that's a challenge.
It's just how I face it. That's all I can control.
That's 100% right. That's right. It makes me think of Viktor Frankl's The Meaning of Life, right? He
Yeah, I
couldn't
read his
control
book.
his external circumstances, but he can control his mind. That's right. My story uprooted, my mother's version of my story. Everything is too hard for her. Oh, interesting. Wow. Thank you. It helped Elizabeth to have good values, know right from wrong. Wonderful. But it meant that she never knew who she was and finding out. Yes, that's what happens when you're the good girl, when you follow the rules, which I think is a story many women hold. My parents always told me I could be anything. Got married, had 3 children. 6 months ago, I left my husband. My husband put me down. Since leaving my husband, I've been doing courses, wanting to serve my community, and wanted to start 4 projects. But finance is the problem. Wonderful courage. Wow. Thank you for sharing. That is amazing courage. How it's helped? I'm okay being vulnerable and being very, very honest, but it's hindered me because of the story I've told myself for a long time that I lack value and I'm not capable of the things I hoped I could do. High academic achievement was the goal. And yes, that's very prevalent in today's world. Lost a spouse and hard to move forward due to legal issues. These are heavy, guys. Being happy didn't come into it. Yeah. Didn't come into the academic achievement. You guys are really onto yourself. You really see it. It's really beautiful. And it is heavy and it is beautiful that you're able to put it out there because that's where it starts. Let's wrap this up so we can get to Q&A and get to some interactive conversation. I guess what I would leave you here is some things that you can do to get more in touch with your story. And I think you guys are a little bit ahead of the game. The first is to pay attention to what you might be resisting. You know, that part of you that feels hurt, the part you've rejected or ignored, maybe the pain that you hide from, the cognitive dissonance you feel. These are all clues that you're likely covering up a deeper truth than the core belief you currently hold. And then stay with it if you can and try to go a little deeper, like really lean into the resistance and breathe through the discomfort of the thought or the feeling. And if you're able to stay with it, a lot of times an insight might arise or a deeper emotion. And if it doesn't, that's okay too, but that's the work. It's all inner work. And then the last thing, and so important, especially as I read your comments, and this is one that I really, really struggled with, is just to be kind to yourself. It's so critical and important when we are doing inner work to be self-compassionate and to love ourselves. It's the only way we're able to let go of an old narrative. Because remember, there's a part of you that thinks that the story is you. So it's going to fight to stay in place and you can't wrench it. It's fighting against yourself. So the only way you do it is by being gentle with yourself so that it just falls away. So when we start seeing the flaws in our story, we start waking up to the fact that we're so much more than the person we'd made ourselves to be, which you guys are showing me in your comments. And the work to unpack and rewrite our stories really just requires us to show up, be honest, have a little courage and perseverance. And the gift for each other is that we just become more complete, more able to lead whole lives, eventually, hopefully with more ease. So for me, my new story is that I am quite certain I control absolutely nothing. I came to that conclusion myself. It took about 40 years. That being strong and capable can only get you so far, and that my worthiness is not tied to my achievements. That was a really big one. My book that came out this year chronicles in more depth the insights and learnings that I learned along the way. from my original narrative to what I'm calling now story 2.0. And now I don't try to run away from my pain quite as much. I've accepted that life is fragile and beautiful, and that there is just as much beauty as there is pain in the hardest moments. And you really can't have one without the other, which, as I say it now, of course that's true, but I really didn't fully understand that before. So I thank you for listening to me, and I'd love to open up the discussion to talk about our stories.
Thank you so much, Laila.
Yeah.
It's this is pretty heavy stuff, and I'm reading kind of a consistent pattern of several people related to confidence. And I know my story is also related to confidence, or like feeling like I don't belong or I'm not liked. And I think with age, it's like we get better at identifying when those emotions come up. My response to those emotions is typically to be the tough guy, like I'm strong, I'm capable, I can take care of this.
Yeah.
But what happens, like, how do you catch yourself and start reframing a story? Because I'm assuming that you have to address the underlying cause of stop telling yourself that you are not worthy. But how does that happen? And what do you do if you're stuck in that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. This is the work of all of our lives, right? Is to identify what is having us be stuck, and to start to go inside and to unpack it. And we usually get stuck around one of three things. It's either that we're not worthy. It's identity issues come in three flavors. We're not worthy because we really want to be loved and liked and appreciated and accepted. We're not competent because we really want to be seen as competent, or we're bad, we're not good. We may have several of those inside of us, but there's one that particularly hooks us, right? And how you start to really unpack that is to really sit with that thought and go within. Where are you holding it? Where are you feeling it? And to lean into that discomfort. For me, if I even got a hint of any sort of negativity that meant that I had to sort of be sad or anything outside of happy, positive, because that was such a finely honed mechanism for me, I would be off of that in 2 seconds. I didn't even recognize that I was doing that. And it wasn't until life forced me, with 3 successive losses, to have to stop, slow down, and grieve. That's when my inner journey started, and I started realizing, like, oh, I've been living a very incomplete life. I have not allowed myself to really who I was. It took years of me feeling awful and grieving and remorseful and stuck, and there was nothing good about it. But you have to go through that to get to the other side, because what I learned was I had so many unprocessed feelings, so many things that had happened that I just kept on pushing down, that I became very emotionally brittle. And I had lost sight of who I was and what I wanted and how I felt. I really didn't know how I felt anymore. You know how that is, right? Something might be bothering me. It's like, oh, I'll just push it away. And you do that long enough that the signal gets lost. And so the process for me was to really just go down all those layers and allow myself to feel what was coming up, especially if I didn't understand it. I used to feel like I needed to understand it first. And because I'm sort of a cerebral person, and the reality is feelings come up before your thought and your understanding of what that feeling is. So now I'm just more free with allowing myself to feel bad, to feel sad, to be confused, whatever. And then I my understanding and my thinking follow. And just giving myself that space now, I feel a lot more grounded. The other thing I would say is, and don't beat yourself up for being in a less than sort of positive, happy place, because there's growth in that, right? So if you're not feeling worthy, all right, what's that all about? And ask yourself, is it true? I don't know if you guys know Byron Katie. She does great work. And that's the question she asks all the time. Is it true? Right? Because that really has you start thinking, is this true? Or is this a story that I've made up? So I'm not worthy. Really? Is it true? Let's unpack that a little bit. What's the evidence? Why do I believe that? Why do I think that? If you stay with that long enough, right? So that's sort of the intellectual way to go through it. And then there's the emotional way to go through it.
Laila, you something you said just made me remember a really poignant part of your book of an aha moment that you had after your husband died and your daughter was consoling you. Can you share a little bit about that aha moment?
Yeah. So my mother was a young mom, and she was in a marriage where she didn't have a lot of agency. And so while she was very nurturing, she really wasn't there for me or my brothers and sisters in sort of any sort of meaningful way. And so I took on the role as the helper, the fixer, the savior very quickly. And she didn't know enough to not allow me to do that. And when that happens, right, when the roles get unnaturally reversed, right, I became the mother and she became the child very, very early on. And I carried that. As much as I loved my mother, I resented her for that. And we were in this fixed, dysfunctional relationship that neither one of us knew how to get out of. And after my husband died, and that first year, my daughter was only 3, when she tried to help me after Daniel had died, she would come to me and she's like, "Mommy, she would actually say, I can help you." And there was this siren that went off in me. And I was so acutely aware that this is exactly what I did with my mother. And I really knew at that moment that I had to be really, really clear with her that I was the mommy and she was the baby. And that I said to her, it's my job, it's my joy to be your mother. And so I get to take care of you for the first 25 years, then you can take care of me. And I honestly, it is probably the thing I am most proud of in my life, whatever I accomplished, because I feel like I was able to break the cycle with, my grandmother was a very young mother. My mom was a young mother, right? And so my mother mothered her mother, vice versa. And for me now, I feel like I've broken the cycle of that inverted relationship.
But that's complicated, right, Laila? Because it's like you are responding by showing strength, but yet that is part of how you respond to your story. I mean, that is your response. So you have to find a balance there, right?
100%. When she was 3, I showed strength. Now she's 17. Now my challenge is showing vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I would purposefully, when I came home, say to her, "How's your day, Mommy?" "Oh, it's tough today." And I had to learn to do that, right? Because my default answer was, "It was great, it was fine," right? And I can't tell her to be vulnerable while I'm, Wonder Woman, right? And so now I definitely show her a lot more of my struggles and not having the answer and being okay with that. That I think one of my biggest learnings is not having the answer and not being able to fix something isn't a loss for me. It just is what it is. And eventually you find your way through. It doesn't make me less of a person or less capable, for that matter.
Such an important message. I'm curious about the concept of fake it till you make it. I think that's the saying. But you
Yeah.
know, like when you feel yourself starting to go down a bad path of negativity, does it help to fake it till you make it, just to start practicing new behavior, or do you recommend just really sitting with it and just observing your emotions?
It's a great question. I mean, I think it depends on what your story is, right? For someone like me that grew up on fake it till you make it, I would say I still do, right? But for me, it's like, okay, notice when, you know, you're not really being real with yourself, and allow yourself to kind of come down a little bit, because that was such a finely honed coping mechanism for me. If the way you hold yourself is the other way, which is, gosh, I don't know if I am capable, I don't know if I am worthy. If your story is the other way around, then I think fake it till you make it is a way to be able to get through that. And Amy Cuddy, who's a Harvard professor, has a great TED Talk on that, because I see people putting things in the chat. She, in fact, just came out with a podcast with Brene Brown, and she does all sorts of studies where she shows that, like, if you do these power moves and these power poses before you go into an interview, statistically, you're going to be more confident. And so there is something that if you physically make yourself big, it helps you to actually feel big and show up in that way.
That's fantastic. So building resilience, this is all about building resilience, right? Any other tips related to building resilience?
I mean, building resilience is, there's so many ways to do it, right? It's mental, it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's so depending on who you are, you can, if you're someone who tends to forget about themselves, then for you, building resilience can come in the form of self-care, exercise, going out, being in nature, meditation, yoga, eating well, getting a massage. If you're someone that maybe is an introvert or kind of stays to themselves, maybe building resilience for you is to be more proactive about reaching out and connecting with others, right? Because human connection builds resilience. Practicing gratitude, seeing the positive and the silver lining in things. If you're someone that tends to look at sort of, oh, what could go wrong, right? Reframing to the positive. If you're someone that likes to think about things a lot, take action, get out of your head. All those things build resilience.
Yeah. By the way, Fiona, thank you for sharing that link for the TED Talk. Okay, so describe a moment like when you're feeling your story's coming up, or you're feeling very imperfect, but in retrospect, you can see how it was perfectly imperfect. Can you describe an example? Do you know what I'm asking?
You mean when I showed up in a way that now I realize wasn't the best way to show up?
No, kind of the opposite. Like, so say that you have experiences that you felt very imperfect, but in retrospect, you can see that it was perfectly imperfect.
I'll tell you the one that just immediately comes to mind. When I was the head of HR for Pete's Coffee, and we had gotten bought by another company, and I really I wanted to leave the company at that point. Everyone was leaving, and I didn't know how to have the conversation, and I was really afraid of having the conversation with my CEO. He was really tough. And so I kind of, I did my big pose, I got myself all ready, and I went in there and I made my pitch, and he got so mad at me, and he said, well, this is highly improper, and the timing is terrible, and da, da, da. And I, when you get so scared, you hear your heartbeat in your ears, and I was frozen, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I wanted to run out of the room. It was flight for me. I was like my amygdala, and I don't know how, I just sort of breathed through it. And this was scary guy who didn't show a lot of empathy. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm sorry if I'm not doing this right. I'm just asking for your help. What can you do for me? And for me to say that, to show that kind of vulnerability, to ask for my, needs to be met. I mean, I really felt like I was in another body. I was buzzing. I was crazy. It diffused him like that. He goes, oh, well, I don't know. We'll see. And I'm like, okay, thank you. And I left the room and he ended up taking care of me. Had I gone at him in that moment when he got tough with me and I got tough back, which was my normal way, the whole thing would have fallen apart. And I think about it because he was a tough CEO, and everyone used to make jokes that he took you out to the woodshed, and I was never on the receiving end of that because I kind of kept away from him, and that moment I was terrified, and I was perfectly imperfect and just showed him my vulnerability, and that's what spoke to him. It was fascinating.
I think that is such a good example. People love to help. And I do think that it's really, it releases so much self-doubt if you can just turn it around and ask for help.
I mean, I think I would have saved so many years and so much money on therapy by just saying, I have needs. And I say this in the book. My therapist said, when I was telling him how capable I was and I could do anything, and he goes, I have a question. He said, if you act like you have no needs, how do they get met? I was like, oh my God, you're right. Like, I set up a scenario to show everyone I have no needs. And then I am sad and resentful and feeling like, how come no one cares about me? Because I've told them not to care about me. And we all sort of do that. And again, I think it's a very female thing to do because we're the nurturers. And it doesn't mean that we can't nurture, but sometimes we have to say, hey, I need to be nurtured. I need to be taken care of. You need to fill your own cup. I noticed one of the comments is someone just said, I noticed last year that self-care is not a treat or a reward, but essential for me to keep healthy. Absolutely. We need to fill our cup if we're going to keep pouring into everybody else's. So whatever that looks like for us, we can't feel guilty about it.
Such great perspective. I mean, and people love to help, and they feel like they feel better about themselves.
That's a good point.
Being able to help someone else. So I just think that's such a trade-off and such a positive experience.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're running out of time. I do want to get through some fun rapid fire questions. And so my first one is, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
My 25-year-old self. Who was that person?
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I would say trust your heart. Don't allow your intellect and your will to override like your true yearning and passion. Because I think that's when I really started to be like, let's just get moving and just really kind of pause and trust what's happening inside.
Would you tell yourself to write a book? How was your process?
I don't, I mean, I was always in my head, kind of turning a phrase. I've always loved words and reading, but I don't know that I thought I would write a book. Yeah, that was very, very organic.
Fiona just asked a great question, so I would love to interject with this. Can we talk about the feeling of not belonging as experienced during the holiday season? Because I do think that is so common. Any words of advice?
I think the wisest thing I could say here, because this is one we all feel, myself included, is that's usually your story. And everybody has a version of it. Everybody, right, has gone off and they come back together and they all feel like they don't belong in some way. So I think if we can drop into more honest, vulnerable conversations, that's how we start rebuilding those connections. right? Even calling it out, even saying like, it's weird to be back, isn't it? Do you know, do you remember who we were? And just kind of naming it, right? I think everybody feels that, and admitting that to ourselves and asking ourselves, is it true?
Well, I mean, maybe it also goes back to what you were just saying about maybe during the holidays, this is a time to ask for help or to be more vulnerable with your friends and loved ones.
It's the hardest thing to do, right? Because it's where you feel most exposed. And, you know, a lot of times we've formed deeper connections outside of our family, right? We found our tribe. I think it's just trying to be gentle with ourselves and also noticing if we're harshly judging others as well.
Yeah.
Right. Even if we don't say it, if I'm judging someone, they feel it and they're going to make me feel like I don't belong there because I'm judging them. Right.
Yeah.
That's definitely
So
something
being
I'm
gentle with
learning.
yourself and being gentle with others. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. On to the lighter side. One thing you do every day that you can't live without.
A gorgeous cup of coffee, and I have to get my body moving. Usually these days it's just walking my dog in nature.
Now I hear you about both of those things. I do both of those things. What are you reading or watching right now?
Oh my God, so much. I've gone on 3 trips, so I've had a lot of sitting in an airplane. I mean, there's so much good stuff on TV now. White Lotus. I just finished Succession, which kind of makes you feel sick. The Morning Show, Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is amazing. The Shrink Next Door is a really good one that's on Apple TV now. And what am I reading? I just finished a couple of Kristen Hanna books, The Four Winds and The Book of Two Ways. Oh, no, that's Jodi Picoult. Those are the books I'm reading.
The Kristen Hanna. Okay.
She's so good. She wrote The Nightingale and The Four Winds and The Great Alone in Alaska. Yeah, she's great.
Okay, since it's the end of the year, I've just got to ask, do you have any New Year's resolutions? And if so, what's one?
Is this so cliche? I have to start doing some weight bearing exercises. I'm getting so weak. And I'm going to pull back on work so I can enjoy my last 6 months with my daughter before she goes off to university.
That's so perfect.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you for this meaningful conversation. You know, the holidays are a beautiful time and they can be a hard time too. So it's really nice to be here with you, with our community, sharing this kind of important information and meaningful conversation. So Laila, thank you again.
It's my sincere pleasure. I wish everybody a really beautiful holiday.